Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Freaks of Nature. So this is a 2015 film that, I just kind of thought was like the kitchen sink of horror. Like, they basically tie every single, they have vampires in this movie, zombies, they might have werewolves in this film, there's aliens in this film. There's basically like everything that you could imagine being done in this film. And so this kind of takes the whole like monster approach and kind of does it slightly differently. Because what ends up happening is it seems like vampires, zombies, and otherwise are just, for the most point, like all just the norm. Like, we have vampires that are just going to school, like normal everyday people. Like, we have like zombies that are to be put to work at some kind of meat factory, and so on and so forth. They're talking about like the zombies need to be unionized so that way they can so that way these zombies don't get overworked, and because they don't know any better because they're dumb, or most of them are dumb. It just all depends on when is the last time that they could eat brains or whichever. Like, bizarrely, some of the zombies are actually smart, and that'll be evident when eventually there will be people that become them. So, going into this movie, I actually just, I enjoyed the goofy nature of this movie. We kind of have it breaking it down, being that, Vanessa Hutchins, who is kind of, Lorelai, is to be this girl that I guess is to be a tease, I guess, to certain guys like Dag. But then eventually you're going to find out that actually she has just been saving herself up for just some other guy. So, so we have, characters like Lorelai that is just kind of using guys like Dag, which is going to be the guy with the bat here. But eventually you're going to eventually see what ends up happening for this movie to just kind of tee it up. So, in the very early stages of this, we have humans, vampires, and zombies who have all been together in this world just in utter harmony. And so then all of a sudden we are to have aliens arrive, and that all of a sudden easily and quickly just has everyone grow into a chaotic state with this town. And so we all of a sudden have the zombies, we all of a sudden have the vampires, and we all of a sudden have the humans all attacking and brawling with one another because they're all pointing fingers to say well, the vampires brought the aliens here, and the vampires are thinking the humans brought this here, and the zombies are just brains. But then no, there has to be one zombie that is just hey, maybe maybe the humans brought the aliens here, and maybe we have to take them out. And the zombies are yeah, that sounds like a thing to do. So they all head out, and we have this one smart zombie that is to pretty much lead these other zombies, and we'll get to that eventually. So, with that said, I just enjoy the bizarre nature that this movie is to go into, or this freaks of nature that this movie goes into. Using the word nature to describe this movie just sounds weird. But yeah, a lot of people would just be yeah, this is just a movie that they just had to come up with some kind of story just to want to do vampires and zombies and all these things. They wanted to cram them all into one thing because eventually there's going to be some fad eventually with any number of these things. And so that's the real drawing factor, is that eventually zombies are going to be popular again, or vampires are going to be popular again, or werewolves are going to be popular again, or aliens are going to be popular again. And so this movie has all of that entwined in itself, and so that'll be more than all of the good reason to go and watch this movie, because it basically just has everything. And I just find some of the characters interesting within it. Like we have like a character called um, Milan, who is to be this like Edward like character, who is to basically go throughout this movie and just continue to seduce women, just kind of like basically throwing one away after like tissues. Like we have Milan that is just going through and biting women, and then eventually he finds out that it's just like, well, like I guess I got what I got out of this girl, so I'm just gonna move on to the next better, attractive, or whatever looking thing. And like this guy is just really just playing the field, but also just turning people. But but yeah, so like you also get all these like different kinds of people that are like wannabe vampires or something like that, where they're like, hey man, like I'm gonna look like one, but I'm not actually one. But man, wouldn't it be great if I could just get easily turned? But nobody wants to sadly see this person be eventually a vampire. So it's like, no, it's not gonna work out for you. So, also, we have like Dennis Leary in this film. I think that was the big selling factor for me. I like Dennis Leary. Like, I don't care that he's like barely in this film. I like Dennis Leary from numerous things like Rescue Me and Amazing Spider-Man. Even though like just the whole fact of him like consistently coming in as a ghost to just look at like Peter and just be like, and, like Peter would just be like, oh yeah, I guess I should go and break up with Gwen Stacy again for the 80th time in this one film, because you just have like Dennis Leary that just comes in and is like, mm. And then like Peter's like, okay, I'll break up with her, and he's like, mm. That's all he does in the whole movie. He comes back as some bizarre ghost, like, and it was funny how like Dennis Leary like had that idea and they went with it for the sequel movie, like as if he like knew the script of the other film and making like a joke or like coming up with some way for him to be in the next film. But anyways, so whatever they must have saw an interview of what he was talking about and just worked that into the script somehow, because I'm sure Dennis was just like, hey man, can I just be in the movie like somehow, like just like have me just be like the like just have me be, because Dennis Leary just wanted to be in more of these films, more of the Amazing Spider-Man films. So that's what just happened with that. But anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself and talking about other things. Uh, this movie's fun. It also has like comedic people like Patton Oswalt. That is to mention, it's like I think we need to breed. I think we're gonna need to breed, and so like we have Patton who's immediately looking at the one girl in the room. He's like, ah, it's like I don't think so. But yeah, so a lot of fun is to be had with this movie. A lot of chaos is to go on with this film. You're going to see a lot of deaths that happen with either humans, vampires, zombies, and eventually they roll those aliens in to just do some bizarre thing that just puts them in this movie but doesn't put them in there very well, or just bizarrely, whatever you however you want to break this down. But I'm going to break this down into spoilers because I think I've talked more than long enough about this film. So let's go out of our way to say that it is that coveted time yet again to go into that spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time to spoil who this movie. So in the very beginning of this film, we are to understand who these main focused people are. So really, we have most of this being done in a high school because it's to showcase most of the young people in this movie. That's the main focus. So early on, we have a guy who is to be this nerdy guy named Ned, who is to desperately go to his teacher as class is going to be starting for this day. And so Ned is going to his teacher, who is Mr. Keller, and like desperately ask that Ned can change his grade to something else, because he didn't think that his paper deserved an F. And plus, also, I guess Ned is wanting this grade to be changed desperately because, like, it's really going to hugely affect his scholarship going forward here. And Mr. Keller is just like, well, here's the thing. As Mr. Keller is, like, desperately, like, looking for, like, blood that is to come off of some, like, coffee pot, like, screaming to people, just like, hey man, if there's not any, like, there isn't any, like, if the blood is almost empty, put a new thing of blood in, like, put a new pot of blood in. And also he's complaining about, like, donuts and how all the donuts are gone. And so one of the teachers is handing him, like, a half-eaten donut, and Mr. Keller's like, I don't want a half-eaten donut, I want a whole donut. Like, I don't know, no, don't give me your donut, no, you mother, like, so, but anyways, so Mr. Keller is talking to Ned and saying, you know what, like, I gave you an F on purpose. Like, I gave you this grade on purpose as a teaching tool. That you need to realize that everything isn't going to be perfect. That eventually that this F was F for fun. And it was fun for me to deliver this F to you. Because this is a teaching tool that you need to learn that, like, even though this paper is the perfect paper, the best paper, like, this paper should be put in a museum somewhere to where everyone can see it and whatever. This is the best and most perfect paper, but, like, I did this to you so that way you can learn. So that way you can, like, try, that you're, like, trying too hard. And that's, like, basically what this kid is. He's a person that tries too hard. And so Mr. Keller is giving him an F because this kid is being way too good at his studies, to where, like, Keller is just like, dude, go and get, like, blown by a woman. Like, go and have fun. Like, go and, like, do anything but actual schoolwork, and just, like, do a effort to something. Like, for the love of God, man. So Ned is just, like, so distraught about him getting an F that eventually he goes home to complain to his parents that, like there's nothing he can do about this F, and it's going to ruin his scholarship opportunities. So we push on to a girl named Petra, who is to go with a vampire named Milan, Milan? I don't know. It's pronounced oddly. So Petra is to eventually be excited with all the other kids that she's going to go into this vamp party. And so, like, Petra's asking Milan about this. Like, hey, like, what's going to be there? What's going to happen? Like, what's going to go on with this? Because Petra is thinking that she's going to possibly lose her, like, virginity to this guy. But instead, he's just going to bite her and move on. And so, like, move on to the next person. Because it seems that Milan is just a guy that, like, because of his good looks, he thinks that he can just go and, like, run through all the girls in the school, and then just like hey, I want to trade up and get this girl, and oh no, I haven't had this girl yet, so I'm going to go after this girl, and so on and so forth. So anyways, that kind of sets up Petra, and then eventually when she goes to this vamp party, she of course gets bitten, and, like, Petra's like, wait, I just thought that we were gonna make love. And Mila's like, dude, no, like, I'm not going to do that with you. I'm just going to bite you. Like, I want to go and actually make love to any number of other people. And Petra's like, oh my God, like, so you're just going to bite me and then just, like, move on? And Milan's like, yeah. Just like, that's all I wanted to do with you. And so, like, Petra's like, yeah, like, I guess we're over. So, that leaves us to a guy named Dag. So Dag evidently is to just be a weed holder for a girl named Vanessa Hutchins, who is to be Lorelai, and like basically he just keeps weed for her to smoke, so that way she will consistently go to his place and smoke weed, so that way they can talk more. And so that's like a horrible thing. And so like that's Dag's, like, this guy with the bats, like, what he's just kind of like, yeah, that's what you're gonna be doing. Like, sadly enough, you're never gonna get with this girl, but like she'll just keep using you and whatever. Like when Dag tries to press her to like have them both like make love, let's just say, because cryptic like words. uh Lorelai is to mention that she wants to save herself for marriage. And it's like, she's not saving herself. She's moving on to other people. And eventually Dag will eventually know that. So Dag is to go and be on a baseball team. And so coincidentally, Rick Wilson, who is Dennis Leary, is to uh, go and basically hand off all these kids' jerseys to all of them, and to basically just cement that since he paid for everything, and like since he like is giving all these people all these jerseys and whatever, that like he can like just basically give them all crap. And for the fact that basically Dennis is to like mention how like he's bringing in riblets to this town, and basically like this place is to be known for the house of like the home of the riblet, that eventually like Rick can just be a hole as much as he wants to anybody. So Rick pulls Dag aside when eventually Dag is to eventually like be in line. And so Rick is like, where do I know you from, Dag? And Dag is like, well, my mom used to work with you. And Rick is like, yeah, that's right. Like, I fired your mom. Like, yeah. Like, and so Dag is like, yeah, that's great. Like, now my mom is unemployed. But Rick is just like, well, look on the bright side. Like, now you and your mom can have, like, spend more time together. And, like, isn't that great? And so eventually, like, Rick just gets to the point of, like, just pulling Dag aside and just, like, talking about him, about his mom and everything like that, and just, like, just kind of, like, talking him, like, alone. And, like, I thought, like, this scene was just kind of funny. So, pushing on, so, Dag is to go on and is to be, I guess, a pretty good pitcher, but I guess he sucks under pressure. So he can throw a mean, like, fastball or whichever, but when the pressure is on or the heat is on, like, he's going to go and freaking hurt a man. Because what ends up happening is we have Chaz Jr. that ends up coming up to the plate. Like, I don't know if this is practice or what this is, because, like, it seems like we might just have one like home jersey with Wolves on it and one away jersey that says Wolves on it. So I'm like, is this practice, or is it like actual, like, is it like a game that they're just throwing as just like something to just do? I don't know. But so Chaz Jr. is to come up to the plate, and we have Lorelai who's watching on, and like, yeah, like come on. And so Chaz Jr. is to say like, hey man, like, I'm gonna go and like, can give like dad, or like Chaz Jr. is to mention that he's gonna give Dag's ball a new zip code, and Lorelai is just like, hey, like, be easy on him, he's my neighbor. And so Chaz is talking all this crap, and he's like, "Yeah, man," like he's like throwing dirt in the catcher's face and all kinds of crap. So Dag is all of a sudden looking at Chaz Jr., he's looking at Lorelai, he's looking at any number of other things. And so Dag ends up going and taking the ball and beating frickin' this guy in the head, knocking his helmet off and just like injuring this guy to force him to have a thing of headgear for like 2 years. And so that causes like Chaz Sr. just be like, oh my god, like my son's like pro shot is now like basically just like up in flames. Like it's basically like burn that bridge off because like Chaz Jr. is not going to be able to be this pro athlete and so on and so forth. And so uh and so that leads to like a bunch of different stories that are to be fizzled off from all this. So, but we get to know like the meat and the bones of most of these characters. So let's get on back to Ned. So Ned is to go home and complain about his paper to his family, and his parents could barely give a rip. Like, Chaz Sr. is to basically just be like the only thing that he cares about is that Chaz Jr. is to get a pro shot at baseball, and Ned is just a guy that is eventually going to be forced to work with Chaz Sr. at the car lot to sell cars. Or also, Ned is eventually going to work with his mother, like spraying down ammonia because his mother works at is working at the meat factory where they do the riblets. And so Ned can't bizarrely eat the riblets because of some chemical that's inside of them called TXP, and I guess he's bizarrely allergic to that. So and so like we have like Chaz Sr. that is to mention like, hey man, like these chemicals, like if anything, like they wouldn't put on it if it wasn't safe, and man does it taste good kind of thing. So but we find out that supposedly this TXP had bizarrely come from Saturn. That they took this chemical from off of Saturn to now be placed here to make meat products out of like riblets and whatever. It's so bizarre. Like all of a sudden we're just coming up with like, hey, something from Saturn is now here. So anyways, so pushing on. So Chaz Sr. is just like, hey, like when Ned is just be upset about where his life is going to lead, like Chaz Sr. is just to say that like, well, yeah, you know what? I know we're all distraught about Chaz Jr.'s pro ball hopes, but like we just all need to just calm down. We just all need to grieve and and just get over it. We just need to cope with everything. And Ned is like, I don't give a crap about my brother. Like I'm just worried about my future, and I just don't want to end up going and selling cars for a living or like working at some meat plant. I'm not doing either one of those. Like I just want something different for my life. To the point of eventually Ned, who had during lunch period, eventually had this one zombie called Jenna, who was helping Ned get his food tray when Ned was to drop it, because there's plenty of times where Ned is to be harassed by a number of other students, like basically like tripped or hit or smacked into a locker, all kinds of things throughout his entire day. So Ned is just so freaking done with having to, like, one, be so smart, and to one be so worried about what his future holds that Ned just decides, you know what, like I'm gonna go and spend time with these zombies and like see what their lives are like. So we have all these zombies that are in this one like caged area, and so all the zombies are just going and like eating these can filled like brain like things of cans. And so eventually we have Jenna who's like, hey, I remember you, this zombie who's like, I guess does have something of dialogue here. And Ned is like, oh yeah, like lunch, like I saw you at lunch. And Jenna's like, yeah, like I remember. And so Ned is to ask like Jen of like how things are, or how like that like he asks about her like family, and it's like, yeah, like I have my mom and dad and some guy named like Steve or Bob or whatever that are just like going and eating brains with my family, just some random guy. So uh what ends up happening is that the normal like a bunch of humans come out of a car and go and fling a slushy at the zombie and at Jenna. And Jenna like doesn't react at all, does nothing, whatever. And she just goes on to like just start talking to Ned again. And Ned is like, wait a minute, like there was just a slushy just like chucked in your face and you didn't care. And Jenna's like, yeah, of course I didn't care. Like, nah, like, why would I care? So Ned is like, wow, like, I want to be just like you. And so Ned goes and takes his shoe off and takes his sock off and tells Jenna, it's like, hey, like, if anything, I think you forgot about one thing of brains. And Jenna's like, man, what do you mean? And so Ned is to say that there is some brains in his foot, and that Ned wants Jenna to bite down basically on Ned's foot. So that makes Ned turn into a zombie, and so we start slowly but surely seeing this guy's face melt and eventually like start to like change into a zombie. Of course, the guy that you kind of see like waving off to the side there is of course Ned. And so eventually we all of a sudden have, because there's a very opening scene here where we are to basically just see both Lorelai and Dag, who are just kind of running throughout this town, like with a bunch of zombies and vampires chasing after them. They go into a house to eventually see that all these zombies and monsters and whatever are breaking in, and eventually this leads them to eventually turn around and see a alien spaceship landing, and then we're like, well, wait a minute, like X amount of time before. And so all of a sudden we have a spacecraft landing into this town. And so that all of a sudden causes everybody to just be like, wait a minute. Like, we now all have to have a conference of sorts trying to figure out how these aliens all came about to be here. And so that leads to have all the humans going into some like auditorium or some like gym or whatever to talk about this. We have the vampires going in some spot to talk about all this, and we have eventually like the zombies who were like all kind of rung together by some preacher who didn't really have much to say. But then Ned went on to just like tell these like zombies what exactly to do because they didn't know what to do. And so like he's talking about the aliens and how maybe that the zombies should start taking control and try to like all come as one to go and just attack everyone, so that way the aliens would just go away. So, and the vampires are, and the humans are just mentioning that the vampires, because of how they're all like, how all, every single one of all the vampires are all like good looking guys and whatever, that a lot of the guys would eventually lose their women to vampires just because of how attracted they are, and how there's probably a large number of guys that had their woman like eventually tell them that they have had an affair to a vampire. And so the vampires are just like, yeah, the humans brought these aliens here. Like, we're going to go and just, like, take them down. We're going to go and kill them because, like, we think the humans brought the aliens here. And technically, they are technically right. Because the humans did bring the TXP from Saturn. And that's what actually brought the aliens here to this planet, was to eventually consume all of the TXP from this meat factory. And here's also the thing. Like, we have a lot of these aliens that are going and basically, like, probing all the aliens to get all of the TXP out of their system, so that way the aliens could take this back with them. And we'll eventually, like, see that in the film. So, not the probing, but just the figuring out, like, where, like, the aliens are trying to probe everybody to see where the TXP is. But eventually we don't actually see that in camera. But anyway, so pushing on. So that just leads to all of a sudden at this, like, town square, we just have these like, we just have the humans just brawling it out with the vampires. Just, we have guys with, like, chainsaws, and like vampires are bringing in, like, their, like, strength, and like there's people with pitchforks and all kinds of craziness. I'm gonna just pause here to do a little reset, so let me give you that. And we're back. So, because what ends up happening, like, right before we start to get into this big brawl, is that Lorelai and Dax, or Dag, helps if I get the name right. Lorelai and Dag are going and smoking weed, and eventually Lorelai is to sneak out of Dag's home, because Dag, all he wants is just to sleep with Lorelai, and Lorelai is just disinterested. So eventually Dag's parents are to come in to see that Dag is smoking weed. And this is, of course, to be Shooter Parker and Peg Parker. And a lot of people will probably recognize both of these parents. Joan Cusack has been in a number of things, especially a lot of times with movies with John Cusack. And, of course, Bob Odenkirk has been in a lot of things, like Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, and whatever. So, Dag is to, of course, think that he's going, like, we assume that his parents are going to ridicule him because they found weed in his bed. But if anything, they're just like, hey, like, they're very hippie-ish, like, parents, and like, hey, like, I get it. Like, I get if you have, like, a thing of weed, it's perfectly fine. And also, like, Shooter, who is Dag's father, is to basically mention, like, hey, and also, like, we also need to talk to you about, like, the changes that your body's going to go through. And Dag is like, dude, like, I know about puberty, I'm perfectly fine. But eventually, maybe, like, there's still a talk that needs to still be had. But anyways, because end of movie. So, anyways, so pushing on here. So, these parents are very hippy-dippy. They're okay with reasonably just Dag smoking weed. Like, I think they have done it in their past. They've even done it in probably sometime twice a day. And so Dag is just like, what are we even, like, I would have been like, what are we even doing here? Like, what, like, great, you guys are both accepting of my weed thing, and it's not even mine. It's actually Lorelai's. He doesn't even smoke. Technically, he probably gets weed secondhand smoke, but, like, so he could probably still get high from that, but whatever. So, anyways, pushing on. So, this town is now all in a fight, a brawl, whichever. Getting to the point of both Dag and Lorelai, who is going to eventually find themselves in all of this mixture of people all fighting it out. So it ends up eventually having the zombies all coming into this brawl as well. And so that just leads both Dag and Lorelai to just run off, to be like kind of like the scene that you see early on in this movie. So eventually we have Petra, who is to find out that Milan is to eventually had been sleeping with Lorelai, and so now Petra just wants to go after Lorelai to kill her, because why not? Like, if everyone's going to die anyways, it might as well be her also who dies here. But it is kind of funny though, because what ends up happening is Petra ends up biting Lorelai, but she bites her, but it just turns her. And then when Petra is to see Lorelai later, like, Lorelai is completely fine that Petra had killed her, and that also, like, it was actually a benefit for Lorelai to eventually become a vampire, because her chest had grown even 2 times larger that day. And Petra is just like, oh, like, like, because Petra didn't get any, like, advantages, with the exception of maybe quite possibly be able to jump really high, and quite possibly have supposed vampire strength, but Petra, like, expels that. She's just like, that's not a true thing. So that's just a myth. But anyways, so what is the real true advantage to being a vampire then? Maybe being able to jump really high, that's about it? Like, so, like, you had, like, there's no real true... So what's the point of becoming a vampire, I guess? To just be able to just have to just die in the sunlight? That sucks. So, anyways, moving on. So Dag and Lorelai are to be running away from any murderous thing in this town, and so Dag and Lorelai go into this home that all of a sudden is, like, full of zombies, and so that leaves Dag trying to help Lorelai, but then eventually they run up the stairs, and that is when Lorelai is to be killed by Petra. And so Dag is trying to figure out a way to escape all this, because eventually he gets, like, thrusted down these stairs to eventually have to fight off this vampire, which of course he ends up having to kill this vampire with some large bizarre fish that he coincidentally had on him. And it seems bizarrely that every single time these vampires are to get something through their chest region, because it doesn't really look like they, like, got killed through the heart. Eventually they just explode, which just seems weird. Anyways, so, and they, like, get like hit with blood and all kinds of things. Like, it's kind of funny when both Dag and Lorelai are to eventually be outside of this home, how, like, Chaz Sr. is going and, like, taking down a ton of these zombies, but then all of a sudden he gets outnumbered, and, like, he just starts getting, like, ripped and torn apart, and he's like, oh my god, they're eating me! Like, oh my god! One zombie, like, took a certain kind of intestines and then put it back and grabbed another kind of intestines. Like, what difference does that make? And, like, he, like, has his arm ripped off, and it was his bowling arm, and all of a sudden he was to be like, why am I not dead yet? Like, why can't I not pass out from this? Like, this is awful. And eventually he just, like, dies and then quickly comes back. He's like, oh my god, like, I just have to keep living through this horrible thing. And so, like, Chaz Sr. is just hilarious when he's eventually outnumbered by these zombies that are basically just tearing him apart limb from limb. And so he's just, like, eventually both Chaz Jr., Chaz Sr., and all of Ned's family, with the exclusion of his mother, like, all become zombies. and you have this moment where like Chaz Jr. is high-fiving Chaz Sr. with his own hand, which I thought was hilarious. But because Chaz Jr. was in that onslaught of people, that eventually he got bitten from behind by a zombie, and so of course that made him become a zombie. So, anyways, Pete is to eventually go and try to fight off uh, all of these monsters, which is to eventually lead to him going off with Petra and go on to his neighbor's home, which is to be his old pianist's like place. And so, because what ends up happening is both Dag, Petra, and Ned are all looking on as this alien ship is to drop onto Earth. And so these three characters are all making their way into this old lady pianist's home. And so Dag is to eventually go and know that there's like a cellar or like a kind of basement that is like to be had underneath this home. And so he's trying to open it. And here's where we get Patton Oswalt's character that is to come in and like try to figure out if Dag is a actual like normal human or not, or if he's like a thing of like hey, maybe he's a different person in someone else's skin and all kinds of things. And so Dag is like, no, I'm a real alien, like, believe me. So eventually this guy asks Dag a question that only he would know. And he mentions that he crapped himself while in some piano recital. And so that leads to like going like, okay, I believe him. So they come down there into the basement, and so Patton Oswalt's character is to like mention like the rules and what's going to go on here, and eventually they're going to need to breed and like and all this stuff. And so immediately once Dag's back is turned, we have both the old lady who's the piano teacher and Patton Oswalt's character just easily and quickly torn apart by both Petra and Ned. And so Dag is like, oh my god, like, you killed both of them. Like, good god. And so they're like, yeah, like, we were hungry. And so it's like, yeah. Like, so eventually that just causes both Dag and Petra to, like, just kind of catch up. So it seems that Dag and Petra had a 7 minutes in heaven kind of time together, where supposedly what had happened is that both Petra and Dag had this time together. And so what happened was supposedly that Dag had touched Petra's like chest and had been called the Titty Whisperer from then on. And so like Petra's like, how did anybody get that name out? Like, how is it that? And so like Dag was mentioning, it's like, dude, I wasn't like saying this name. If anything, like people had like said that because like we had to go in there and we had to whisper, and maybe people naturally assumed that I touched something, which I didn't, and like this and that. And so like Petra just mentions how she just became like this girl who is like consistently being called like a slut or whatever. So Dag is to like just go on and just be like, I don't know how this name all got out. Maybe I said something. Maybe I don't know. Like it like didn't seem important to me. Like it kind of seems like we're trying to like protect Dag to seem like he's a nice guy, but maybe he did say something. So eventually, like Dag is to eventually talk about like the history of both him and Ned, on how like they were like really good friends, but then eventually Dag dropped Ned just because like Dag was trying to get popular, and so he just kind of like left Ned to the wayside, and so that led to like Dag just doing this like laser pointer. And so Ned is just like being this like almost like cat, where all of a sudden like Ned is trying to like figure out how to get the laser pointer from off his body, and so like Dag is having fun with that, and Petra is like, God, that just seems horrible, but it's like it's funny. But we just have Ned who's just like going throughout the whole entire like he's trying to desperately get to this laser and like try to get to it, but he can't. Like a cat would do, sadly enough. But anyways, so pushing on. So what ends up happening is that these kids retreat to the school because if anything, everyone can get food. Like Petra can get blood, Ned can get whatever the heck that he needs, maybe brains, and Dag can get food also. So like that's their grandmaster plan, to just go to the school to just get food in them, even though like and both Ned and Dag like have both, or both Ned and Petra have both eaten technically. So and plus also what ends up happening is like they're kind of forced to having to go out of this basement anyways, to because there's still monsters on one part of the basement, so they go on to this other part of this basement to get out of it. And so what ends up happening is Petra, this is during daylight, and so all of a sudden Petra is starting to burn up, and so Dag gives Petra like every single bit of clothes that he is to have on, and he doesn't have underwear. And so Petra is to say like, hey, why don't you wear underwear? And he's like, it bundles. or whatever, it like bundles to me, I don't like it. So Petra is now wearing every bit of Dax's clothes, and so now Dax is walking around naked, and all of a sudden we have the aliens that are to come right behind Dag, and they don't even notice him while he has no clothes on. And so Dag figures out that if you walk around without any clothes on, these aliens won't notice you, bizarrely. Like, I guess that's like one thing that like they can locate, like if people are to wear clothes, they can locate that, but they can't when you take the clothes off. Like, so you basically have to wear no clothes for these things to not spot you, bizarrely. So pushing on. So Ned and Petra go to this school, and then Dag is to follow and to tell them what had happened. So they go and they eat lunch, and then eventually Dag decides to go into this boiler room and to just kind of hide out in there. And like Petra goes and like talks to him, and like kind of mentions that like basically Dag is gonna feel like he's gonna die like a virgin. And so Petra is just like, well, like maybe you won't die a virgin. Maybe you won't. Like maybe I'll just give you some pity loving, you know? Maybe I'll just give you some pity loving. So what ends up happening is that both Petra and Dag like start to get hot and heavy with it, and all of a sudden like Dag is to quickly like climax in his pants, let's just say. And Petra's like, really? Like, I get you that hot? And, like, Dag is like, yes, because you're a woman. Like, it's like, you're a woman. So, like, anything that is, like, touching all upon me, because I don't think he's ever been with anyone in his life, basically. It's just like, whoop-pow. So, Petra is to just be like, well, maybe we'll just keep going. Maybe we'll just, maybe we'll just kind of, like, just keep on going with this. And so all of a sudden, like, Petra is to just, like, do, like, a little bit of, like nibbling or whichever onto Dag's neck. And Dag thinks that Petra is going to bite him, and Petra's like, no, I wouldn't do anything like that. Like, believe me. Like, since Petra has already been on that kind of end of things, she's not going to do the same thing to Dag. And so Petra is just kind of offended that Dag would think of her that way. And so, like, Petra just jumps out of the thing. And Dag is like, you could have jumped out of here the whole time? And so that pushes Dag and everyone to get out of there. And so Ned has finally figured out, like, why the aliens are here. And it's because of the TXP, because one of the aliens are to arrive to go and grab Ned, and he's to realize that they were trying to siphon out the TXP from out of this guy's body, and so that's what he figured out. Once Ned was to be grabbed by one of these aliens, and so they're like, okay, well, where's the biggest supply of TXP? And so they end up going to the butcher place that, of course, is the home of the Riblet, or whatever. So, and that goes to Rick Wilson. So they go to Rick Wilson and they explain all this, and Rick is like, I'm not helping you. Like, maybe these aliens aren't here for that. Maybe it's just a coincidence. And whichever. And so, like, man, like, come on. Like, and so Rick is just like, no, like, I'm not going to help you get the heck out of here. Like, don't let the door split you where the good Lord sent you, or whatever the heck that bizarre phrase is. So, because what ends up happening is Ned ends up killing Rick's wife, and so that's what pushes Rick to just like, you guys get the heck out of here. Like, this woman was slamming, I think that it was his secretary, because the reason why Dag fired, or the reason why Rick fired Dag's mother was because he found a much hotter secretary that he could frickin' bang, and so that's why he fired Dag's mother, to get a much more hotter secretary. But I guess this secretary is now dead, hence why Rick is like, get the out of here. Like, you killed my one secretary that I could sleep with till the cows come home. Now I can't do that, so get the out. So, anyways, so that leads us to eventually having these people, eventually one by one, all of these people start to get taken by these aliens, and they get put into this one place that is to, like, separate the vampires, the zombies, and the humans all, like, in separate places, so that way they won't fight one another. And so now, like, we have Dag, who needs to desperately figure out how they can kind of break these walls to get the heck out of here. And so Ned realizes that they had done, a long time ago, a hack or some kind of thing for the computers of a school to just put this whole thing in, and just be like, okay, I don't know how exactly this relates to that, but okay, I guess whatever. So all of a sudden, we have this master plan of that all the humans and all the zombies are just going to rush against these walls, and that will break, like, these force fields. And so, of course, that does. And so now, all of a sudden, we have everybody who's like, yeah, like, hey, man, like, let's all work together, and let's all, like, try to, like, go to, like, the butcher place and, like, have them, like, release this chemical and whatever. And so they all get together to all go to this place, and so now they're asking Rick to help them. And Rick is like, you know what, with how much money that I sunk into this town, no matter how many things that I've bought and whatever, like, I still can't get the things that I want out of this town. Because, like, before, like, they were trying to persuade Rick to save them, and maybe they'll have, like, a trophy built in his honor, and he's like, ooh, a trophy? Or, like, a trophy, a statue? built in his honor. He's like, ooh, a statue, ooh. So Rick is to basically mention to all these people that he brought so much wealth into this town, but like he's basically treated as like an outsider, treated like an a-hole and whatever, and that's basically why he just became an a-hole. Even though like he's done so many things for this town and they're ungrateful. So now he's the only person that is going to be here to save them, and so they're like, yeah man, save us, you can do it, you're the only one, like, yeah, we're gonna cheer for you to help us. And so he's like, okay fine, everybody come in here and I'll release the TXP, and all the aliens are gonna come in here and soak this all up. And so what ends up happening is these aliens come in and all of a sudden like unlock themselves into be these smaller aliens that come out of this thing, and people are like, ew. So these smaller aliens go into this pool of TXP, consume the whole thing, and then become this one massive gigantic alien. And so all of a sudden this alien is coming in and just saying like, hey, like, if anything, like, I came here to like help all of you people because all of you people are a mess. Like you guys like just descended into anarchy as soon as I came here, and like I came here to help you. I came here to save you from yourselves, kind of thing. And so all of a sudden, like, the alien is to eventually start quoting, like, "We didn't start the fire," the Billy Joel song. Like, "We didn't start the fire." And the world was turning, and the the thing was burning. We didn't start the fire. And so, like, people are just like, Billy Joel? Like, he's seriously quoting us Billy Joel? He's like, what the heck is this? And so, like, the people are like, you know what, alien? You. Like, no. Like, we don't want your help. Like, we don't want you quoting us Billy Joel. And the alien is like, well, I thought, like, supposedly I thought on your planet, like, Billy Joel was, like, the most universal, like, thing to quote to you that everyone would understand. And, like, no. Like, that, like, Billy Joel, like, no, like, we're not gonna take any of that. So all of a sudden that just leads to, like, the alien just going, well, F it, you know what, I tried. So all of a sudden the alien is going and killing people off, and so that goes to just have them just accidentally find out that spraying this alien with ammonia, I guess, like, if you like see the movie like Pacific Rim, like Pacific Rim mentions that the aliens in there were to like the alien parts were to just be like kept alive because of pneumonia. So I guess pneumonia is to kill aliens off in this movie, or to shrink them down, or whichever. So while that's going on, all of a sudden Milan is thinking that this is the perfect time to strike, to get Petra and to basically just suck the life out of her. Because, like, Milan is just like, you know what, I think I've, like, I think I just want to be able to, like, get something out of Petra. Like, just, like, get some, like, food from her because I'm thirsty. I'm thirsty. So Petra is just like, well, no, like, if anything, like, I'm not going to give in to you. And so that's when Milan and, like, Petra are kind of, like, fighting it out. But Dag comes to Petra's rescue, and all of a sudden, like, Dag and Milan are fighting it out. And so, or Milan, good God, Milan, whatever his name is, whatever the Edward-looking motherfucker is, and I'm just like, whatever with his name. So, all of a sudden, we finally find out that Dag is not a normal human either. He's a werewolf. I'm like, oh, thank God. So we do actually have a werewolf in this movie. And so all of a sudden, Dag is to howl at the moon, and his parents are like, oh man, so I guess he did finally learn, like that his body is going through some changes, and they're like, yeah. So like, so we don't have that like Teen Wolf moment, but we get close enough. So Dag is to go and like and now be a werewolf and start beating the crap out of Milan, and so eventually, like Dag goes and kills Milan, and so now both Dag and Petra are like, "Hey, both of us are monsters now." So like, hey, like that's gonna keep them together, and like I guess keep them as a couple to where they're just like, like like he came to my defense. He's my knight in shining armor. Well, he's my knight in shining hair because he's a werewolf. So that leads us to eventually having Dag come back as werewolf, and just like we now have the conclusion of this alien. So this alien is to like Ned is to like come and like try to like get at the alien, and like the alien is to like try to like dodge and weave and whatever. But that just leads the alien to just run back off to his ship and supposedly drop some ball down onto the ground, and is to be, I guess, some bomb of sorts. So there is this one moment in flashback form was when Ned was to supposedly catch this one ball and at this baseball game, because Ned at one point was a outfielder, which all of a sudden we had Chaz Jr. that smacked like Ned down and grabbed the ball and ended the game. And so now Ned's one opportunity to eventually catch this ball, and he just hands it off to Dag, and Dag chucks the ball back into the spaceship before the spaceship is to close in its like little door thing. And all of a sudden this alien ship is to explode, which is to basically just be like, yeah, we did it. And so, like, yeah, like, that's, like, we basically transition after that, just like, okay, everything is back to normal, and there's no, like, leftover alien things going on here. And so, it's just basically everything comes back to normal, and everything is back into harmony again. And eventually both Petra and Dag are together. Dash? Good God. And so really everything is copacetic. And Lorelai is still a vampire. So yeah, that's all I have left for this one. I'm going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.